All right, and if StreamYard is to be believed, we are in fact now live. And I just want to give a huge thank you to Palmer for taking time out of your busy day to chat with me about your books, about writing, about SPFBO, and just about life in general. Before we jump in, though, I do have links on the Amazon links in the description box down below if you want to check out her books. And yeah, Palmer, take it away.
Hey, you guys. I'm saying hi to Mike here. Mike Mulman. Hey. Yeah, so I'm Palmer Pickering. Probably anyone who's joining we kind of know each other already. It kind of seems to be like we're getting to be like quite the community here. But I'll just do brief intros of my books without just Moon Deeds was my debut, and it's a science fantasy. It was published in like 2019, I think 2018, and it was a SPFBO 5 semifinalist. And then it ends on a wicked, like obnoxiously abrupt cliffhanger, and it goes right into this. Like if I hadn't been afraid of publishing a 1,400-page book, I'm not going to mention any names, ice-ish, of people who publish huge books, but if I had the nerve, it would have been an omnibus of these two together. Because it really...
Oh, wow. That'd be a thick book.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to do that as a debut because people are already telling me it was too long. But it really... the story just continues into that book. The lore gets much broader. You start learning about like the other planets and kind of more of the longer arc of the star people and stuff. And the powers, the magic and shamanism of the twins kind of just grows and gets into some real shaman tropes and stuff. It's a thing. So like people generally like Light Fighters more than Moon Deeds. Actually, it's more plot driven. It's much faster paced. Okay. The scene has been set. And then my recent release last year is Heliotrope, which is a completely different thing. We're twins here. It's pure epic fantasy, sword and sorcery, kind of single point of view character, single point of view character, linear plot, a pure genre.
And SPFBO semifinalist now.
Yes, I made it into the semifinals. So the list of semifinalists is growing. I think there's 28 now. Last I checked.
Probably. I haven't been keeping on top of the semifinalists. I should, but once I submitted my semifinalists, I was like, okay, deuces, bye. Like,
that's right. Was this your first year being a SPFBO judge?
Yeah.
And you're on which team?
I'm on team Bookborn.
Okay, right. That's fun.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun, especially there was a lot of like banter. We have our own little chat going, and it's been a lot of fun getting to hang out with them and kind of judge books together.
How many on that team?
There was Jordan, Dominish, Pete, and then of course there's Bookborn in there, wrangling all of us and me as well. I think I've got us all. I've got an awful memory when it comes to these kind of things.
Yeah. So I noticed
5 books. I'm assuming there's 6.
You had 5 books? Yeah.
Yeah, I had 5 books.
Okay. Because I noticed that she still got some like undesignated books.
What do you mean?
Well, some are not cut, but they're also not semifinalists. So that means not everybody is finished.
Not everybody is quite done yet.
Okay.
There's one person who is, I think Jordan is still working her way through. And she said she'll meet the deadline though. So she just doesn't want to announce until she's 100% certain what her pick is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So as one should. But
absolutely. It could be the last shadow entrant that has like 2 stars on Goodreads that's going to win the whole thing, You
never know with SPFBO.
Yeah.
You never know.
I meant 2 reviews, not 2 stars, but you know what I meant.
Oh, yeah. True. Yeah. Well, either could be true though. It could all of a sudden find its audience and then just take off.
That's right.
But while we're on the current SPFBO and we're talking about Heliotrope, everybody I talk to loves, and I mean loves, the beginning of Heliotrope. What's that been like to experience the amount of love that the first section of this book is receiving?
Well,
because I'm hearing people saying it's one of the best like openers of a fantasy book they've ever read.
Well, that's like, gives me like just like shivers. But I'm also like extremely humble because I notice the people who don't love the opener. Like there's people who are like, oh God, I had to wait like 4 chapters for anything to happen, like yawner. So there's definitely people who don't, who's that style of kind of the slow opener doesn't work for them. Although to me, I set the foundational elements of the rest of the book in that chapter. Like it might not be obvious at first, but pretty much, and I was going to say something that could be a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely a muted style that I went to. I intended to set a mood, rather than like drop you into the middle of a battle, right? So
yeah,
how do you feel about that, Andrew?
I'm not the biggest fan of in media res, and I've recently discovered this about myself as a reader. Like certain in media res, like if it's just explosive bombast, like Malazan is in media res, it drops you right in. That's by design. But sometimes if it's just like if you could have started it with not being in media res and in media res not being like needed in order to start the story, it doesn't work as well for me. I'm not naming any authors or series or anything like that. I'm just speaking in general. But what you did in Heliotrope is you introduce an older protagonist. You introduce somebody who's already been through the wars, who's already world weary, who's found some modicum of peace just being a stoneworker and the joy that can bring in a job well done. And there's something about that message and that theme that resonates with me as a reader. Maybe it's because I'm starting to get older. I'm not in my 20s anymore. That I kind of identified with Telio in that regard. And there's just something understated about Telio that's just awesome. Like he's not bombastic. He doesn't do braggadocio. He just does the thing and moves on. And I loved that because I'm like, oh, he's gonna brag about it. Oh, he's not even gonna like acknowledge that he did something incredibly crazy.
Yeah. It was the stoneworker part. I mean, I've always liked crafts in general. I've always been fascinated with like field stone walls, like
yeah,
those were always
they're cool
for me. Like, yeah. And how you make them without mortar and how does that work? And just stone carvers in general. I mean, but if you think of like the Masons, the Masons in the United States, their symbol is a masonry thing. Like they're literally were Masons, right? But they're also these esoteric, like secret society thing, right? So yeah, and the craftsman and the crafting kind of also there's other types of crafts, right? There's Dinsmora with the embroidery and weaving, right?
Right.
That's a craft. There's
the metal workers.
There's metal workers. So yeah, that I like, slotting it into that time period, that mythical medieval time period, pre-industrial time period, by having, really hands-on a little bit of the crafting, just like in video games, the crafting aspect of life in that time. I just thought it was interesting. And in terms of Telly not being a braggart, yeah, I mean, I kind of the characters that I kind of like in movies, like I mentioned this in another interview, I think, but like Braveheart, Mel Gibson, like I love that kind of just stoic, all of Mel Gibson's characters, even like in Mad Max and stuff. Right. They just do what they've got to do. Like they're not about amassing power, even though that is a little bit of a subplot with Telio, like a little bit of the resent for not having the power, right?
Right. Because I mean, he was like, "Oh, I'm the better swordsman. I'm the better warrior, but because of my class, like I'm not allowed to become this person." Right. And like we just get to you do a lot of character exploration within Heliotrope because I mean he's experienced tragedy, he's experienced pain, loss. I mean, he lost his family in the wars, and he's still searching for his long lost son. And all of this is introduced very early on in the book. And then we get to explore that throughout, a number of pages. 771 pages.
Yeah. So there are those heavy themes, but no, he's not a braggart. He's not, he's a humble but very competent person who's just kind of doesn't really want to fight, but
no, he'd have been happy just working the stone.
Yeah, situations present themselves, where he has the tools, he must do what needs to be done. But yeah, and the whole the whole found family trope, I that was fun to build.
I mean, it's arguably my favorite trope in fantasy. Just because it's always great to see people come together in adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that trope particular is designed to tap into that. And I think that's very fun to explore. It never gets old to me because, I mean, you can take tons of different types of personality types, situations, and then just combine them in new and interesting ways to where it never feels old, tired, and worn out.
Yeah, I think it's one of those kind of visceral primal things, right? The family unit, whether it's your, nuclear family or an adoptive family or, one that gets thrown together. And you've got the whole, loss of his own family kind of mirror reflective kind of counterpoint throughout the whole story, and him kind of working through his grief and loss and stuff. And everyone else, the other, characters also having their grief and loss, right? And everyone trying to get through it together. So yeah, it's kind of heavy in that sense.
It does have some heaviness, but I mean, there's a heavy through all the two of your books that I've already read, because I've read Moon Deeds as well. There is an underlying heaviness in both of the books that you've written that I've read, but I think they're handled in very, very tactful ways. But one of the things that I kind of wanted to ask was kind of like, where did the impetus to write come from? Like, did you grow up reading? Do you have favorite authors who are influences on you? Like, where do you draw that inspiration or that drive to write from?
I was a really voracious reader. I was kind of like you in my teens. Like, I would literally read like a book a day, and I'm talking like fat books,
Oh, wow.
And I would plow through. I mean, maybe it took me a few days to read like Dostoevsky and stuff like that, but I was reading all that stuff as a young teenager. Yeah, I mean, I just plowed through these huge, Jane Eyre and just a lot of the classics.
I've got that one to read sometime soon.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many. And as a younger child, I would read a lot of animal books and mysteries. I loved like Nancy Drew. I loved like the Black Beauty series. I loved, what else? I loved anything having to do with magic.
Oh, yeah.
No surprise, right?
Yeah, no surprise you're writing fantasy and sci-fantasy.
Yeah. So I got really intrigued with possibilities of, things beneath the surface or unseen forces. Those always intrigued me. And when Star Wars came out, I was like a teenager when Star Wars came out, and that was just like the bomb. Everybody was just like lining up, to see the next movie.
I don't want to brag, but I was 9 when episode 1 dropped. So
yeah, I know. I'm old and you're young. I get it. I know. It's true. Sorry. I mean, I grew up with like Star Trek and Twilight Zone, and and
but what a time to grow up.
You guys are still making Star Trek movies, and like now there's Black Mirror or whatever instead of Twilight Zone. But hey, man, the boomers
even in Star Trek, I grew up. My mom was a huge Trekkie, so I grew up on the original series.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it is reruns, I still grew up on it. So
okay, all right.
I'm not throwing shade. I was just making a joke.
So we're simpatico. Yeah, I'm definitely old, but my life experience gives me something to write about, right?
Because when I was very interesting life, from what I remember from previous interviews, very interesting.
I've done some things,
done some things, been to some places, worked some jobs, met some people.
Well, I never had kids, right? I was married for a time, but that didn't work out. So I don't have kids. So I had a lot of time and freedom. And
I mean, you see all this gray hair?
yeah.
That comes from kids.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I love my
Exactly.
kids, but there is a price.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I did a lot of international traveling, like one of the stories with my Russia story, playing hockey with the women's Olympic hockey
I
team in
remember that.
Moscow, the Russian team. Yeah, that's the whole story. That was my first
You
novel that I
talked to
finished.
Matt on his channel about the Russian story.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember who I told that, but yeah, I was writing with my. Oh yeah, okay, right. That's right, Miggins. I only know him by Miggins. Yeah, the first novel I finished was actually sort of an intrigue with the Russian hockey player. It was a historical fiction, sort of like it was written at the time when the Soviet Union had fallen, and the hockey players. Well, remember in the Olympics, a bunch of Russian hockey players defected, and then I think Fedorov might have been one of them, a couple of the older ones, and then they started basically trading the best Russian hockey players to the NHL for money. So basically selling them for like $1 million, right? Mm-hmm. And then, and so I wrote about one of the characters was one of those Russian hockey players who basically got traded to the NHL. And then another character was a female Canadian hockey player. And it was like this intrigue, espionage, romance thing. But anyway, he ends up getting extorted by the Russian mob, and which happened. This is all based on like McGillney. Alexander McGillney is a hockey player who got extorted by the mob, the Russian mob, who were like, "Hey, we traded you, we built you, we made you. Now give us $1 million." And he's like, "F you," and he took him to court, and he won in the United States. But anyway, so it was all based on that. But I said, "Hey, I need to really understand, first of all, hockey, and second of all, Russia." So I started playing hockey. I was on a Canadian Women's Hockey League. I was living in Seattle at the time, and I played defense, and I was a bruiser, and I get in the penalty box and stuff. So that was fun. But then I answered this ad in the back of some hockey magazine about go train with the Russian national hockey team. It was a camp, summer camp, right? For 2 weeks. I was like, okay. So I applied, and they're like, a woman? Like, yet.
A lot of women play hockey. My wife plays hockey.
See?
She customizes jerseys. She plays like twice a week at the local co-ed team.
So there you go. So I was in that world, right? When I lived in Seattle. Yeah. But in Russia, this was before women's hockey was an Olympic sport. It wasn't allowed. It was illegal for women to play professional hockey or to play even league hockey in Canada at the time.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. It was crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's like how far our society has progressed in a short period of time. Anyway, so they accepted me. So the Ministry of Sport sponsored me and gave me a visa, and I went over to Moscow. And so I was hosted by two men's team. The first was Dynamo, which is actually the KGB team. Okay, so it was FSB. It was former KGB. So I was sponsored by the KGB. They put me up for a week. They gave me a room, like a little dorm room or whatever. And
oh, lovely.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now in retrospect, I'm like, were there cameras in that room? And
it was at least bugged in some fashion.
Yeah. So, I was picked up at the airport by the guy, this like young, good looking guy in like this big black kind of Jeep thing. I was like, definitely like KGB. Anyway, that was at the time when that was in between the KGB and the FSB sort of where, it was detente and before Putin. So it was an interesting time. Anyway, when there was, Americans were allowed there. And so anyway, and then the second week I played with the women. I moved to a different place and played with the women's national. I practiced every day with the women's team that was trying out to get into the Olympics. And the coach, I played with them. I practiced with them every day, but I was actually pretty bad. So the coach would like just have a riot, like laughing, like making me do all the drills and laughing at me when I fall and stuff. He would like literally they're all drunk. Like they all are like addicted to vodka. like literally.
Yeah.
So he'd be
Well.
over there like hung over with his red nose, like passing me the puck, and I'd miss and trip and fall, and he'd like laugh. He thought it was the funniest thing. Anyway.
So did they speak English, or
No.
did you speak Russian?
A little.
Just enough to know that they were highly amused.
Yeah, I mean, you learned I've traveled. I was an exchange student in France when I was after high school, and I traveled around Europe for several months. And you learn that you don't necessarily need to speak the same language to communicate. Like I could tell you my gypsy story, where I was in a overnight train compartment with a bunch of gypsies, and we communicated fine without any common language. You want me to tell you that story? I'll tell you that story. So
yeah, but tell me the story, and then tell me how that kind of ties into some
you want to keep it about
communism.
Books? Okay. Yeah, that one.
Because I feel like there are elements of that may have ended up in this story.
The gypsy thing, not so well. The gypsy thing was about smuggling. So there is a black market on the moon. See, you're very perceptive, Andrew Wizard. Yeah. I'll tell you my smuggling story, then we'll get back to books, because I told you I'd love to talk. So
no, I'm here for it. Listen, as an interviewer, the less talking I have to do, the better my life is. Okay, so you chat away.
So I was traveling across Europe with a girlfriend, when I was like 18, and with a Euro pass, and we lived on like $5 a day. Literally, that was our budget. So a lot of times, instead of spending money like on a hostel, we would just take the overnight train because it was free, because we had the Euro pass. So we would pick these. We would just go. We would look at the map. We would go, well, okay, let's pick a city that's like 6 to 8 hours away that leaves around midnight, and that's how we would travel. We're like, okay, well, hey, we're in Italy. We can go to Greece in this overnight train, which went through what used to be Yugoslavia, which is now like Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, right? So I
can't keep on top of it.
We get on the night train to go from Italy to Greece, which goes through Yugoslavia. It's the middle of the night. We had our own compartment. The train was empty. It was dark. We had our own compartment where you pull the glass doors shut, and the bank seats come down and form beds. So we each had our own bed, and it's our private train. Like no one was on it. It was the middle of the night. It was dark. We went in the middle of nowhere through fields, right? And so it's like 2 a.m, the train stops. And in the middle of nowhere at this little station, and the train fills up. It's chock full of gypsies, like legit Romani, right? In the whole like headdresses and like no teeth. And so all the men would line up on the aisle outside, and they were smoking their hand-rolled cigarettes out the window. This is 2 a.m, right? So we get moving. All the women like flood into the compartments. So it's an 8-person compartment. So 7 women come into our compartment, which made it 9 instead of 8. And so they all are sitting on the seats, and the 9th one was pregnant. So she like lay down between our feet, right. And anyway, then they proceeded to take out, I guess they got on right before they left Italy, and they were smuggling blue jeans, porn magazines, and cigarettes, and they were hiding them. So they spent like the next hour hiding them. They shoved the magazines behind the heater, and they would took off their peasant skirts, and they were taping like cartons of cigarettes around the insides of their thighs. And they had all these Levi's blue jeans, and they looked at us, me and my girlfriend Carrie. They looked at us, and they're like, Amerikanski, and like, and so we ended up making a deal with them that we would hide with now speaking the same language, right? This is all like gestures and just telepathic like understanding. We ended up hiding their Levi's in our backpacks because we're Americans. They're Levi's, they're ours. So we smuggled Levi's into Yugoslavia for them. And then so
you're officially an international smuggler.
That's right. I participated in the black market of Levi's in former Yugoslavia.
I didn't see that in the author's note.
Yeah. So in Moon Deeds, there's a colony on the moon, and they're pretty self-reliant in terms of oxygen, water, more or less, although they do import some water, but they import food. They're not self-sufficient food-wise. So they would get their food imported from Earth, more or less. They had some greenhouses, but it wasn't enough. So anyway, but there's a lot of black market activity going on of like gnarly stuff, which gets in some of the dark themes, sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking. And those are like plot points in that series. So I deal with human trafficking, I deal with sexual abuse, I deal with substance abuse, I deal with how we're cruel to each other and what happens in a society when there isn't enough of food to go around. Like what happens? What do people resort to when they're in desperate situations? What about during war? What happens when you have to kill the enemy? That's how it starts off, really, with Tor as a soldier, right? And then PTSD from all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, dealing with substance abuse recovery. And I mean, I just like, it's all dark themes based on a moon colony and a larger cosmological theme, which is the long arc of Star Children saga is that we're descended from an alien race from a lost planet across the galaxy. And these star children have to find our ancestors. We're supposed to reconnect with them every 1,000 years to like re-energize our DNA and our energy bodies. And if we don't, we start descending into this like dark age. And they already missed the last one because some shit happened. And if we miss this next 1,000-year conjunction, like we're screwed. And what happens when societies degrade and fall into dark ages? The genders start becoming separate, and you know, women become men dominate women. Typically, sometimes it's the other way around, but usually the males dominate the women. Religion starts taking over, and fundamentalist takes root, and you get told what to do. And there's not and there's hoarding of resources, and people starve while other people grow rich. And so, you know, you see the societies start to break apart. And then what happens eventually? There's some light age where there's some enlightenment, and usually it's maybe some religious, spiritual realization or some, you know, equitable society kind of structure. Anyway, it kind of just deals in that realm.
So dealing with that, or we kind of talked a little bit about this backstage, and I kind of want to bring it up before we move into like other things and like, you know, interacting with reviewers and stuff like that. Like we'll touch on all of that, but you know, without any spoilers, there are some elements that, you know, require content or trigger warnings within the Star Children saga. And why is it important to talk about those, but make sure that you're doing it respectfully and in an impactful way?
You know, why is it important to talk about those topics or to give trigger warnings? Talk about the
Well,
topics.
no, why is it important to address these topics, but in a way that is sensitive to the people who have gone through these things?
Sure.
I don't know if what I'm trying to ask is coming through.
I understand totally. So I just want to respond to Nico. Yeah, we're talking about Moondeeds, which is the Star Children saga, which is currently there's 2 books, Moondeeds and Light Fighters. It's going to be a very long series, at least 6, if not 9 or 12. I'm working on the 3rd book right now. Yeah, it's completely different from Heliotrope, like a vast universe of opposites, right, Andrew? Yeah. I mean, the style is very different. Very, very different. Yeah. So let's talk about sexual abuse and rape. Like why would I write about that? First of all, I would call myself a feminist. Like, I believe in equal rights for women. And I feel that patriarchies can be very harmful to women when they get to an extreme like Afghanistan or something like that, right? But why even? I almost didn't write the whole rape part, which is in Light Fighters. I almost didn't because I was scared of it. But actually, one of the first short stories I ever wrote was, I'm going to tell you this story. So just to get to the punchline before I go back and dissect it or, you know, deconstruct it more. The reason I write about it is so prevalent in human culture and society. It's everywhere. Okay. It's everywhere. And so many women and a lot of men have been raped, and it's just not talked about, but it's all over the place. And I feel like we need to address it, and it needs to fucking stop. right? It is not okay. It is just not a
Well,
thing. It's just not a thing
I'm
that,
not disagreeing with you at all. I'm letting
yeah,
you just run. But
yeah. It's
I
not a thing.
agree. It
It's
needs to
not a
stop.
thing that we should just be like, oh, they just like, it's just porn. No, it's not porn. It's rape porn. Do you think that maybe that rape porn, that person is actually being raped? Like, is that okay? Anyway, I know, I personally have not been raped. Okay. Just put it out there, but so many of my friends are. So one of the short stories I read that freaked people out so much that I stopped writing for a few years. In college, I was in my dorm, and the woman in the room next to me, like down the hall, across the hall, she didn't lock her door. One night, a stranger came in to her room, this is this white, snooty Wesleyan University liberal arts college in Connecticut. Okay. Lots of rich people, like one of the Kennedys went there, right? You think, oh, it's safe. Tied her hands together with a cord from the telephone out in the lobby, and stuffed a sock in her mouth and raped her. And she was a virgin. Okay. She was like 19. And this happened like right next to me. It could have been me, except I grew up in New York and I'm freaking paranoid and always double locked, deadbolted my door. So I wrote so that was just traumatic, even being that close to it, right? And I wrote a short story. It freaked me out so much. I was trying to figure out, like, who was this and why would this guy ever do this? It freaked me out so much that I wrote a short story about it, something similar, from the rapist's point of view, because I was trying to figure out why someone would do that and what was the experience of that person, like what was their mental problem that they were doing that. And it was so realistic. My roommate read it and she was so freaked out by the story because it was so realistic and so creepy, you know. Anyway, so I mean, just like so many of my friends have been abducted. Incest is like rampant. One of my friends was sex trafficked by her father so that they would have a place to live when she was like 14. Oh, we're homeless. This guy will put us up if you just sleep with him. Like, you know, just stuff like that. It's just all over the place. Like, what is wrong with us? Right. So one of the reasons I write is I write to process trauma. It's like my own therapy. I'm trying to figure out what is up with humanity, what makes us tick. And so the sexual assault in Heliotrope is from the victim's point of view. And I was telling Andrew before we came on that women who have read it, who have been sexually assaulted, thanked me for writing it. And men who read it get really upset. And one of the dynamics around it is, what are the men in the society doing about this? What are they like you think of a frat party. This is getting really deep topic. Sorry, people, you can go if it's bothering you. Like, you think about rapes that happen in frat houses, right? It's kind of a thing that happens every once in a while. All right, you think that the guys in the room, first of all, there's more than one. It's usually a gang rape of like a drunk, you know, or drugged out woman, right? What about the guys out in the hall?
I never went to college, so I don't know.
So they're usually these big kind of Victorian houses, big things, and usually they'll, like, you know, drug a woman, or she'll be like stone drunk, like, you know, fall down drunk, and they'll get her in a room and they'll just basically do a gang rape, and they take turns. So who are these guys? These guys are walking around us. They work with us. They're our neighbors. I mean, they had to grow up. They didn't die. Where are they? There's a lot of them. What about the other guys in the frat who knew something was going on? They're guarding the hallway door so no one goes in. They hear it happening. They walk by. They're upset about it, but they don't do anything. Who are all these people? A lot of them around us in this world. Like, one of my boyfriends was raped by his stepfather when he was 4. Like, this is just shit happens. So I write about it because it's in our world, and I don't know if I should write about it, but all I can say that after I wrote it, I kind of felt better. I don't know. It was my own therapy.
I mean, if it was cathartic for you, and I mean, fiction exists as a vehicle to critique the real world, which is something I just made up off the top of my head, but I feel like makes sense. And if we can't critique the real world and address it in fiction, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, but at the same time, it needs to be talked about. It needs to be addressed, and I think it's important to write about it.
Yeah.
And as long as it is done in a constructive manner to where it serves as a vehicle for critique or to address the situation, I think that is a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the book, I mean, it is about how the victim deals with it after and how they process it, the PTSD. And it's a long process. It's not just something like, oh, you take a pill or you go to your therapist and you're all better. No, it lives with you for the rest of your life, right? So how do you, yeah.
This book right here does a lot of the same thing with a female character as well, and it was one of my favorite parts of the story. Now I haven't read Light Fighters yet, but I mean, it's kind of the same setup as this book ends with it, and then the second book uses it as a vehicle to then address and critique and grow the character and process the trauma. So
Exactly.
and it's enjoyable. No, not enjoyable. It is rewarding to. Sorry, there is a lot of noise going on in the background, but it is rewarding to see a character overcome.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And also because this is fantasy, I make my characters work for their magic. Like they don't just get it, right? Like the traumas lead to more magic being bestowed upon them or unearthed or learned. And so traumatic events typically result in more magic, which is, you know, another vehicle for that. Yeah. Yeah. And I hear 11th Cycle. I haven't read 11th Cycle, but people comment on that, you know, there's I guess a pretty graphic rape scene towards the end of that or something.
I made it about halfway through before it wasn't a book that was for me at the time, especially because it involved something that struck a little too close to my personal life that was happening at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a fire in the book, and it happened right at the time where a fire occurred within my family. So I put it down for those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that we can kind of segue off and into something similar is, you know, reviews, because I know you wanted to talk about this topic as well, is authors dealing with reviews, dealing with positive, dealing with negative, and how you feel authors interact in that space.
Yeah. So if you're a new creative and you haven't delved in creative spaces before and ever put your work out into the world, it's the first time for everyone, right? It can be a really scary experience. You're being very vulnerable. You're putting your creative self out in the public square. And it's shocking when it's gratifying when you get positive feedback, and it's kind of shocking and disorienting when you get negative feedback, because, you know, it's been your solo work that's kind of, you know, you're bearing your soul and you've worked for however long on your creative project and you're really proud of it. And then you put it out there, and it can be very disconcerting when you get negative feedback. I think people who have I grew up in my writing career and being in a lot of critique groups. So I kind of learned how to deal with negative feedback from that experience. Because, you know, critique groups like to tear apart. They like to tell you what they don't like about it, you know, so you get kind of used to like everyone telling you what they don't like about it or what you did wrong. And so you just kind of get used to it. If you've been solo and haven't been part of a writing community and you're not used to it, then it can be like, oh my God, you know, how could you not love my baby thing? So I think that even if you are experienced and have received negative stuff before, it still can be disconcerting. But I think that people have to just shut their mouths when you get a negative review or whatever, and it bothers you. You know, talk to your friends about it, bitch about it with your family, or you know, maybe a couple close other writers or something. But if I let myself respond in the moment, like kind of one of the instincts is to want to attack back. You feel like you're being attacked. Actually, it feels like an attack when someone doesn't like your work, because it's very personal, right? And,
Right.
and even if objectively, you know, maybe they have a point, the emotions kind of can override it. And you're just like, oh, I feel attacked and insulted. And that person, and then you get defensive, and then you attack back, and you're like, oh, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. And how could they not love this? And didn't they see what I was trying to do? And then, you know, and then if you voice that and you put it out in the public square, then suddenly you're the idiot. Like, so it's best to just like look at negative or critical reviews and learn from them. That's kind of what I do. Is I'll look at them and I'll be like, yeah, I knew that, or yeah, they're right, or I knew this wouldn't resonate with some people. Like one of my Life Writer reviews is like 1-star review. It says, needless rape. The author, to stay as far away from Palmer Pickering as possible. She took a great idea and ruined it, and like basically threw the book across the room. And I'm like, I kind of knew I was running that risk, that it would hit people that way, because it's a very emotional topic and it's a negative topic. Right. And I also don't like to read that kind of stuff. So I totally get it, you know. Or, you know, I have a very descriptive kind of slice of life, visually detailed writing style in Heliotrope in the Star Children saga. And I know that's not for some people. I mean, you can tell just from reading Robert Jordan reviews. A lot of people hate that style, like literally like detest it. And we'll go on and on about how horrible it is and how we went dribbled for 300 pages. And I'm the same way sometimes with George R.R. Martin. I'm like the Fish King. Like I'm stuck at, I don't know what book it is, the whole the Fish King guy scene. I had to stop after like 60 pages of the damn Fish King. I'm like, I hate this character.
I'm on sword, so I don't know.
I hate this character. I don't care about the salty, briny beach and the seaweed. And like, I'm done. Like, I'll get back to it eventually, I'm sure, because he's a great writer and I like the story. But, you know, so I get it. And
I was reared on Robert Jordan. So
yeah,
that's kind of, I love that kind of stuff, which is probably why I like Heliotrope so much.
Yeah.
I love all that detail.
Yeah. Yeah. So people like it. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. And I totally get it. Just like me, like sometimes I really like just straight kind of simple, dumb plot-driven books. Like I love Dan Brown, like what is it? The Prophecy, what is it called? The thing about Jesus Christ.
The Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, Da Vinci Code. Like so many people hate Dan Brown. I like it. You know, it is what it is.
I've read Da Vinci Code 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, I like that kind of stuff, you know, but some people would just like tear it apart, you know.
There was an actually really insightful interview that Tori, who's in the comment section, did with Crystal Matar. Was it last night? I don't know. My brain.
Okay. I haven't seen it though.
My brain is exhausted. Anyway,
Legends of Brightwash.
Yeah, now that you make me try to have to say the name, I can't say it. Legacy of the Brightwash. Here we go, because it's Legacy of Freaking Bone. It's the second book. I have to go to the second book title to go back to the first one. But they were talking yesterday, and she was talking. Crystal Matar was talking about, you know, the book is already written. I've already published it. So the critique that you're going to give, or the review, I can't unpublish the book that I've already published. I mean, I guess in an indie situation you could, but why would you? Instead, take the review, take the content, digest the content of the review, and then use that going into the next book.
Yeah.
Or the next series, or the next project, or whatever you're going to do next. That's what the review kind of really serves, is to give the author information on where they may have room for improvement, or how they could execute something a little bit better. She had a lot of great nuggets in that review. So I highly recommend watching that interview, because it was really great to see kind of Crystal talk about, you know, the book is published. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to take down this book that I've paid thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours writing and editing and paying for artwork and all of that. Like that, I'm not going to unpublish the book. Like I can't change something that I've already put out unless it's to correct like typos or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. I can take that review and I can move forward with it.
And you can also learn who your target audience is and who they're not.
Absolutely. It's a good marketing tool to figure out, like, did I market my book correctly? Which Crystal, I believe, also touches on. Literally, this is all plagiarized ideas from Crystal Matar. Hats off to Crystal Matar.
40-second review. We got to watch it. Well, when I first started publishing Moondies, I did these blog tours, but I did random ones that I found on the internet, and they weren't really targeted at fantasy readers. And so I would get a lot of romance readers who just could not deal with my books. First of all, they're too long, right? They're too descriptive.
Yeah. There's no romance books are short and quick.
Which one?
Romance books are short and quick.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Those cellophane bricks that they used to do at the bookstores.
Yeah.
That was my mom's Mother's Day gift for like 5 years in a row.
Yeah.
I could get like 20 books for $10.
Yeah. So romance readers are not my target audience. Like I I'm not trying to market. I realize that they're not the kind of reader who's that's not what my books are not what they're looking for. Whereas the hardcore fantasy readers, like the people who are, participating here in this live stream chat, most of you people, I think Nico maybe is one of them, like the fatter the better. Like, give me a fat book. Like Andrew, you're like, oh, this book was too short. It's like,
I say that I just got done reading a 1,700 page book and I am tired. I literally finished 20 minutes before we started.
What book?
The Wandering Inn Volume 2.
All right. Wandering Inn. I started listening to the audiobook of Wandering Inn 1 like 6 months ago. I told you I couldn't get past the drippy purple fruit. You don't even remember it. It was like maybe 30 pages in, I guess. I'm guessing audio. I need to get back and just read the ebook so I can read it really fast. I guess the audio went too slow. I'm like, I really don't care about the juice dripping down your chin. And I'm thinking, like, I like detail. This is like way too much detail. Like, I plucked the fruit and the twig went snap. And it was heavy in my hand, and the skin was textured, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, oh my God, stop.
That doesn't even, like, in my brain, I'm the type of reader where that just rolls right off and I can go with it because I like description.
I think in the audiobook it was just too slow. I need to get back to it. But so, yeah, I mean, who is the author?
Pirate Abba.
Who is it?
I think the whole point is anonymity.
I think
they write under the pseudonym because they don't want to bother. I could probably deduce that the writer is female. I could probably deduce they might live in the Midwest of the United States. Other than that, I couldn't tell you.
So are there other characters? I never met another character.
It's such a massive, massive world. The thing is it gets into, now you're going to make me go off on a Wandering Inn tangent. It gets into the minutia of the daily life in a fantasy world with a leveling system. It is very much like, I think so far where the series currently is, it's only been like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. All those thousands of pages cover such a short amount of time. But again, we can get back to kind of information being done well in a book, because I think that's something that Pirate does very well, is it will address, because it takes people from our world. Like, I mean, the 2016, presidential US election is mentioned in this series because these people lived that life. And when they were plucked out and dropped into a fantasy world, they were in the midst of it. And so they bring with them their political views, and they kind of cling to their political views because they've been dropped into a fantasy world. But when I was researching the series, a lot of the people reviewing it on Amazon would drop this series is woke. Well, that seems like an oversimplification of what the book is trying to do. It is trying to take real people, and I have to specify real people who worship, Christianity, people who are from Japan, who have different cultures, who have attitude problems, who have chips on their shoulders, who have dealt with real trauma in our world, and then superimpose them somewhere else and see how they deal with it. And I think it's very interesting to read that series. But again, I could digress and start talking about Wandering Inn, but we're here to talk about your books.
Well, that's a good segue to one of my works in progress, which is Lit RPG.
Okay, cool.
Which is Darktown. And I haven't really read much Lit RPG. I just heard about it being a genre, and I was like, I play video games. I write.
Zach has read more than I have, but I have.
Well, I just bought a few and I've started reading. I started one, I can't remember the name of it because I already shelved it. I should go back to it.
You need to do Dungeon Crawler Carl. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that audiobook. Mwah.
Really?
Oh my gosh. It does get dark, but it's also got a lot of humor. It's so good. It's so good.
I know. I think you would love that. I know.
I think you would love it.
All right.
And I mean, Tori, I'm in the Midwest as well.
Yeah. So it's called Darktown, and it's a fantasy lit RPG. It's my own take on things. You know how I kind of like to do things a little different. Like,
that's fine.
It doesn't have the obvious leveling thing where it kind of takes you out of the story, or it tells you what level you're at, like ding ding ding, you just achieved blah 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 blah, you know, like you've leveled up. It doesn't have that. It's much more just like epic fantasy, but with game mechanics. I based some of the stuff off of my two favorite games, which is Final Fantasy 14 and Witcher 3. So there's some elements like the dungeons, arena, kind of final boss fights in Final Fantasy. That's something that's
I never played 14, so
yeah, it's about.
Well, no, that's not true. I played like the first couple hours of 14, and then I think my kids were born, and I just lost all impetus to play. But yeah. I did play Witcher 3 though.
You played what? Witcher 3?
Witcher 3.
Yeah. So Witcher doesn't have the arena boss fights. They just have, monster fights.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, it's a fun thing. It's going to come out in a few months. It's in copy edit right now. So
nice.
It's much shorter. And it's not so descriptive. It's a very different style. It's like about half the size of my normal books. It's going to be like 300.
Oh, so a quick read. I can appreciate a quick read right now. I tell you, I just read a big one. I'm ready for some shorter ones.
Yeah, it's going to be 300, 350 maybe.
It's not bad.
Yeah,
but and it's funny because fantasy is the only time when you're like, oh, 350 to 500. That's a walk in the park.
And it has been described as a palate cleanser. I actually wrote it right after I read Legends and Lattes, and that kind of inspired me a little bit of the kind of more lighthearted, not the super deep themes, not the like total lots of violence. Although this does have a lot of violence because we have to kill monsters. Right. So there's that kind of violence, but yeah.
I'm currently reading a cozy one right now called The Stray Spirit, and it's by R.K. Ashwick. I'm about 50% through it, and it's amazing.
Really?
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome.
What's the setting? Is it in a tavern or something?
It's basically a young man who is down on his luck. And then he goes to a shrine because he's a bard trying to get into a very hard to get in guild. And basically he goes to pay respect to the spirit shrine in the hope that it might grant him some luck. And then a supernatural event happens that forces a spirit he didn't know was there out of its tree and into his loot. Ooh. And then he has to basically go on a quest to figure out what's going on with all these supernatural events and try and get the spirit back into its grove, all while dealing with his ex-girlfriend.
Did it make him be an amazing loot player?
He was already an amazing loot player. It just basically turned his loot into a Stradivarius instead. So it took the instrument to from a piece of junk to a Stradivarius, which.
So speaking of loots and bards, I'm reading this tome right now.
Oh yeah, I've got it. It's right here.
So Arathon, one of the main characters, one of the brothers, a lute.
I haven't started yet. No spoilers.
Yeah, they call it a lyre. Yeah, a lyre, Lyre. Really interesting world building, really interesting magic systems. Her writing, Jenny Worth's writing, is just phenomenal. But also, it gives me a mental workout. Sometimes I'm exhausted after a chapter and I have to go read something else because I'm I had to
I remember Nico when he first started the series. He because we were talking Janny Words and I was reading Cycle of Fire, And so he's just like, oh, it's going to be a long time before you get to this. Here, have this. Here's how purple this prose is. And he would send me like a paragraph. And I'm like, Nico, this paragraph felt like work. This sounds awful.
Sometimes I want to take a sentence and just share it with people. See, like, look at the sentence. Like, it literally took me like 4 times reading it to figure out what it says. I mean, and so there's brilliance in that. And then there's also like, ow, my head hurts, you know? And my writing is the where's, let's see.
Shad says, you know, sometimes it gave him a headache as well.
Yeah, but yet it's just so beautiful also, and so brilliant. You're like, wow, this is amazing. And you know, and some of it doesn't do that, doesn't have like the mental gymnastics. Some of it's just flows. But Daniel, who's on the, if you're still here, he taught me a new word, window pane prose, which is like the opposite of the elaborate. This is unembroidered, as Jenny Wirtz called it, and hers is embroidered, like elaborately embroidered. It's very opposite. No. Yeah, and I specifically try to simplify my writing so that it's easy to read.
Daniel's still here.
Yeah, I was just rereading your review. Very good review. You're a very good reviewer, by the way. Like, you should read his review. It's very articulate and smart and deep. And do you like review for any other groups or something, or are you just like a solo guy? You should read his review. It's like, he's like, wow. Okay. You're in the company of other amazing reviewers, Andrew and Tori and Kay, Nico.
I never consider myself to be a good reviewer, mainly because when I do a review, I keep my written reviews incredibly short. And then whenever I do a video review, it's literally just what's rattling around in my noggin. That's what makes it onto the video. And sometimes because I don't bullet point, I'm gonna miss something. And like as I'm watching it back while I'm editing, I'm just like, I meant to talk about this point. And then I got to do a cutaway as I like whip out my phone and start talking about it real quick.
Yeah. Another thing Jenny Wirtz does is uses a lot of words that I have to look up in the dictionary. I think a lot of it is British. And a lot, I don't know if she is British. I don't think she is, but I don't know. Nope. And a lot of it is.
I think she lives in Washington.
Okay.
No.
And I think it's.
I don't know.
But it's a style. I was watching another. Who was it? Could have been Philip Chase and somebody.
Philip is reading Jenny's books.
Yeah, it wasn't about Jenny. It was about, so he's like a PhD in literature, and he was being interviewed, or he was on a thing last week, a couple days ago, with another like PhD in like, you know.
You're talking about AP?
Huh?
You're talking about AP?
I don't know. Is that a person?
AP Canavan? Did he have an accent?
No, I don't think so. No, I'll have to look it up. It was just a few days ago, but they were going off about writing styles and about the type of writing style that is, you know, very ornate in it, how it gives you kind of, it really pulls you into the mood of fantasy and like.
Did he wear really round glasses?
I don't remember. Maybe.
Because I met an individual that Philip had just done, and I'm forgetting his name, an interview with last weekend.
That was probably it.
During Mike's 100K live show celebration. So that might be. Yeah. Oh yeah, Nico said she lives in Florida.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, they were going on about that type of writing style that Jenny does, which is a thing, which is, you know, an art, and it's and they were talking about the authors that write like that, and how it brings in a mood, and it kind of puts you in the place of this fantasy, and it and it totally is. It definitely adds something to it. Whereas this window pane style of writing, it sometimes feels too contemporary. And if I throw in like modern day phrases, it throws people out. But it was also a topic that was going on in the indie community discussion like several months ago about how, you know, a lot of indie authors lately are writing in a contemporary style. They're writing like traditional fantasy, but in contemporary language, right? And so that rubs some people the wrong way, and other people really like it. And as I,
well, you're not going to please everybody.
Yeah, when my books get edited, some people call out that they're like, this is too contemporary. You shouldn't say that. This is medieval. And I'm sort of like, I don't know. I kind of like it. I don't know.
And, well, you're the author. That is your decision to do so. By the way, how does Star Children or Star Children? Yeah, Star Children. There we go. Book 3. How is that going? Because I know it's been kind of put in time out for a little bit as you do some rewrites.
Yeah, it's a slog. I've been doing like yesterday I did like 500 words, which is like a page, 2 pages. I mean, it's like almost nothing. It's sort of like I'm just like choking these like sections out. It's just like this big labor. Part of the problem is that I had 3 work in progress going on at once. I had Darktown, which I want to get out. And then I was doing the short story for Dom's anthology, which didn't take a lot of time, but it wasn't really a distraction. It was mostly Darktown. And so I would keep hopping back to Anaximenes, and I have to really get in the zone with those characters for it to flow and for me to write a lot of words. And I'm also dealing with the 3rd book of a trilogy, which is, weaving a lot of plot lines. I posted on Twitter, I counted I have like 22 plot lines that I've got to like progress or wrap up in this book. And it's like, no wonder my head's about to explode, because what the F? Like, why did I do that to myself? Like, there's so much going on that I weave together all these different things going on with 3 point of view characters. And it's a project, man. So it's boggling my brain.
Because this is like the closing of the first arc, right?
Correct. It's the resolution of the moon arc. And the second arc is going to be Muria. Is all
where they go out.
It's another planet. Yeah, so it'll take place mostly in Muria and some on Delos, which is the other kind of trine planets. So it'll be mostly there. And Muria I've already written a lot of the Muria book, and I can't wait to get to it. There's like crystal caves and like glowing jungles and like talking beasts and unicorns and like, crystals, sentient crystals. And, it's just like super fantasy, super like fantasy trope stuff, flying lions but all with the same characters.
I just read The Obsidian Gunslinger, which is a fantasy western with a crystal-based magic system, which is very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have this whole collection of like Lemurian crystals that it's kind of based on. So anyway, I'm at like, I think maybe 50,000 words with Anaximenes. I have a first draft, which I've completely trashed, and I'm just writing it from scratch again, because that was garbage. I wrote it like 6 years ago or something. No.
Shad, the series we are currently talking about is Star Children. And we're talking about book 3, which is a work in progress.
All right. Show her book 2.
Oh. Shad is
or him or her, I'm not sure.
Him.
Okay. Yeah, so that's book 2. Anaximenes is book 3. So I mean, it might be out in 2024. That's my goal. I mean, I think once I get in a groove, Tori, you know how this is. You could just churn stuff out like when you get in a groove, and I could just like finish it in like a few months. Once Darktown goes out, it's just going to be all Anaximenes all the time, like every day. And I pretty much have all the pieces here. It's just I have to get them out in the right, like flow, so it just flows for the reader, and it's not just like these puzzle pieces dropped in, which it's a little fragmented right now. I have to smooth it out, but yeah, there's a lot going on. So that'll close out the short arc.
I still want my sequel.
Oh, it's a standalone.
Okay, listen, I know what you said. I heard what you said. I want.
Okay.
I don't always get what I want.
Well, if there is a book, if there is a book 2, it's called Stone Guardians, and I already know what it is.
See, so then if there's a potential for a sequel, is it in fact a standalone? Whatcha!
I know. Yeah,
I know, Tori.
So what's interesting? Yeah, there's a lot of open thread lines, a couple of major plot lines that are still open in Heliotrope for sure. But and there's something about ending a book where it's not all. It's like happily ever after, but it's not happy ever after, right? I mean, where the hero doesn't always get what they want, and it ends because that's more realistic, right? And it's kind of less expected. So. Yeah, it's kind of a fairy tale that kind of ends like sort of like real life. Like, oh. But I thought I wrapped it up in a happy way, in a way.
You have wrapped it up in a way where you can sit there and say this is in fact a standalone and a closed story, and I can't contest you. But I want more Telio.
Aw.
I would even take a prequel with a slightly more hot-headed Telio. That could be fun.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Just kind of see, hey, you saw the grown man, here's the boy.
What do you think of a book? What do you think of a book from Dinsmore's point of view?
See, so she was a very interesting character to read, because initially she goes through some stuff about halfway through the book that I don't know if she ever fully recovered from, and her presence in the story never really fully re-enters after that. But prior to that, I thought she was an incredibly compelling and interesting character that I would 100% read more from if she was more like that.
Right.
Or dealing with the trauma of what she deals with in Heliotrope could also be fun to read.
Yeah.
That could be fun. Which was your favorite character in Heliotrope to write? Was it Telio?
Blackjack.
Blackjack is pretty cool.
Yeah, Telio. I'm intrigued with Dinsmore, and I think I was talking maybe with Tori about this, but Dinsmore has a lot of potential. Dinsmore is more your classic fantasy, wise woman, herbalist, right? And kind of modeled after someone I know who was also what the plant spirit medicine and moon deeds is modeled after, is a plant spirit medicine woman who I'm friends with.
Okay.
So yeah, it's that whole, having a strong connection with plants and animals, and kind of a spiritual connection. And so that's pretty interesting. I like exploring that world. It's very fun and natural for me to write about that kind of stuff. So Telio, he is my favorite character because it was from his point of view. So, you've
got enough of a world that you built here. Like, you could easily do like a novella collection, just kind of like Sharp Ends that Joe Abercrombie did, just exploring different stories. You could do a young Telio. You could go all the way back and do the war between the Stone Guardians and what are they called?
The Mages.
The Mages. Okay, it's just the Mages. Okay, cool. My brain wanted to assign them a title, and I was like,
I don't think there is. Yeah, the Mages and the Stone Guardians.
You could do a story there. You could do Dinsmore. You could do a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would read a collection of short stories or novellas just set in this world.
Well, I'm glad you like it. No,
it's obviously been well received if it's a semifinalist in SPFBO.
So I was looking at the other semifinalists in my batch before we go blog to see what is my competition, right, for finalists. Because what I really want is to just get a finalist slot, because I was denied the finalist slot in this SPFBO 5. I tell everyone, because who was in my semifinalist group?
Were you against?
Sort of Kaigen.
Oh yeah,
was in my semifinalist slot.
You didn't. That wasn't fair.
I know, right? That's what I'm saying.
Kaigen is universally loved.
I know it is. And I have multiple copies myself. And I just gave one to my neighbor yesterday.
I am waiting for my special edition. Waiting. Murphy named me very rudely.
There's a second special edition. Did you order the second one? Wraithmark? No. Well, that one was only $35, I think.
I got the Wraithmark. You're talking about the subscription service one?
There's a Kickstarter one, and then there's another one.
Yeah, I've got the Kickstarter one.
Okay, yeah, the other is a new subscription service. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that I could sign up for it, but I want. Yeah. I did just order Blood Over Brighthaven. I'm getting the hardcover of that one.
Oh, yeah, I have to read that. Totally different subject matter. It's a school, right? An academia, library story, I think.
No idea. Yeah. No idea. All I saw was that she dropped another book, and I was happy because Kaigen was initially supposed to be. Let's just nerd out for a few minutes. I know you got a meeting here in a few minutes, but it was initially supposed to be part of a bigger series, and there was a tie-in YA series that takes place like 10 years afterwards on a different continent in a school setting. It was YA. It was a portal fantasy, but it was supposed to tie into sort of Kaigen. And she put out a post in early, I'm going to get the time wrong. I'm going to say early 2020, late 2019, probably 2020, where she said she couldn't make the story work. And so she was just walking away because she wasn't if I'm remembering, she's like, I'm just not the writer who's good enough to make this work yet. And she may come back to it at a later date. But I mean, at the same time, like, Kaigen is so good. And when I heard that there was a new standalone and it wasn't tied, I was like, of course I'm going to read it.
Right. Yeah, she has quite the following. So, and deservedly so. So I want to get a finalist slot. That's my goal. I mean, I don't think I'll win, and I don't. It's almost like getting a finalist slot. You do win because you get all these book clubs who read all the finalists. It is all for exposure. It's for exposure reasons, right?
Yeah.
But it's total luck. Like, it just what resonates with whoever's making the decision, which is so subjective. Mm-hmm. And so I've read either full or parts of a lot of the books that are still in the running and Before We Go blog, and they're all damn good, man. They're so good. I'm like, oh my God, these books are so good, right? So
there's a lot. A couple teams have, like, I know Tori's team is stacked. So I'm rooting for Tori. I'm rooting for Phased. I love Phased. But I mean, there is so much competition.
You know year. What? I used to get really like competitive, like kind of nasty competitive inside. Like, I wouldn't articulate it much, but I get like really and now I'm like, I feel like just really proud that all these indie writers are so good. It just makes me happy to be like part of this community that's, like, we're doing it and it's fun. It's fun to have a bunch of accomplished indie authors, and we're sort of like taking the world by storm in a way. Like, I've said it before, but we're giving trad publishing, like, we're competing with them.
In that vein, I received this book today, which is an indie. It's by Mark Holloway. And I mean, you've been around the block for a while. You remember how books used to like advertise other books from publishers in the back of the book?
I saw you posted this today.
Yeah. It literally just says other works and then lists just like EJ Double, Mark Timoney, and Zach. I don't know who Zach Skibner is, but
that's I
now know he has a book out there, and I'm going to look into it. But I thought that was so
I
cool.
know. That is super classy.
It really drives home the term indie community. And I love that. Like, I want to see more indie authors doing that, because that blew my absolute socks off when I opened up the back of the book, because I was just flipping through to like read the about page or to read the acknowledgments, because I do that sometimes before I start a book.
It is super sweet. Well, traditional publishers advertise their other authors at the backs of their book sometimes. So that is really classy. I don't know who that author is. Let me see if I can find Zach's book on my shelf right here.
Mark Holloway?
No, Zach Skiver.
I've got Mark's other two books right here.
Hang on one sec. Where is it? I think it's right here.
Yeah.
I can't find it. But anyway, yeah, I read some of it. It's very plot driven. And I like the kind of immersive, descriptive, like slice of life stuff, as you can tell, because of what I write. So I kind of NFR'd it, but not for now, whatever, NFN'd it, but it's good.
NFN.
Yeah, it's a good story. So I should finish it sometime. So
sometimes, like, as a reviewer, I take on a lot of review copies, and I've gotten to the point where I'm starting to reach capacity on the number of authors I can take on, just because, like, if all of my indie friends are publishing a book or two a year, like, I'll never read another TradPub book, and I've already spent all this money on TradPub books. Like, I'm kind of reaching capacity, which is a good problem to have. But I mean, like, this is my indie shelf and this is my indie shelf, and I have to add a third.
I wanted to say something about reviewers. The whole thing that's going on right now with Daniel Ilborn author in Twitter right now
yeah.
so we were talking earlier about how an author kind of has to have thick skin to be able to expect negative reviews and to not kind of lash out and respond back to the community with your feelings, with your hurt feelings, like just learn from it. But I think that also might apply to reviewers. Like if you're going to review a book and put it out into the public square, and you realizing that authors are just people, and indie authors are kind of on their own. They don't have like the buffer or the support system of a trad publishing organization. It's just them in their living room reading this review. Like you might get a raw response to your review. And to also know that you might get that, and to not let it like negatively affect you so much. Like some people I say are saying, like, should I stop reviewing? I'm afraid to post this review. I don't think I want to review anymore. Like reviewers have to have thick skin too, right? Because you're a writer of a sort. You're putting your thoughts out there and you're being vulnerable by doing that. So I think it's to be expected that you're going to get some backlash, even though it's unprofessional for the author to do that and it doesn't feel good. Don't stop reviewing just because some author like freaks out.
Right. I think it's important to remember, like you said, that we are all people. We're all fallible. We all make mistakes. And some people take it too far. Like what I mean by taking it too far is like review bombing. I do not condone review bombing in any shape or form. If you haven't read the book, you have no right to rate or review to harm somebody else, whether that person has said something inflammatory or not.
Right.
Just choose not to engage with their content. That is a choice you can do. You don't have to just review to hurt somebody. So I do not agree with review bombing at all. And the way I approach it is if I don't have anything nice to say, or if I, as a reviewer, can't constructively come up with well thought out reasons on why I am giving something a bad review, air quotes, bad review. I'll just say it wasn't for me and I'll move on and I'll just praise the books that I want to praise. Because I am, as a reviewer, am not the best at doing constructive critique. And I know that is a weakness that I have, so I choose not to do it. But it's just, I don't know, it's a very complex situation. In the end, if both people come out as attacked, nobody won that transaction. Where it currently stands right now, multiple people are just yelling at each other, and like nobody's winning.
I know.
Nobody. There is no winning the situation.
Don't you think that people would have learned social media etiquette by now? I mean, these public squares everyone has been on social media, I think, for years. Like, you kind of probably, or the email or the tweet you sent where you wish you could unsend it and it's too late. Like, most people learned that years ago. Like, be careful what you put out there, right?
Yeah, I've been on the receiving end of Twitter one time, and I backed down very quickly. And I just okay, I'll just stand to my normal posting on Twitter. Let's keep it happy. Let's keep it to the books. Let's do that. And that's worked out very well for me. But I don't know. It's a very complex situation. I don't have all the answers. All I know right now is people are getting upset, and nobody's winning in this situation.
I love the Twitter book community. I have a mostly
I do too as well. When we get along, we get along great.
Positive experience there. I mean, there's a couple of personalities that kind of like, I probably wouldn't be friends with these people, but whatever. It's a big community. Like, just be chill. Just don't interact if you don't like what's being put out there. Anyway, do you want to spend 5 minutes talking about AI?
Sure.
The threat of AI. Yeah. So I, in my day job, I work in high tech and I'm like an innovation manager. So it's kind of a topic that is kind of current in my life all the time about when new technologies come in. And they're typically responded to with fear, right? So if you look historically, like the typewriter, like replace the pen and ink, which replaced the quill, which replaced the stone tablet. And the people with the feather quill are like, what is this pre-filled plastic ink thing? Like, I will never write with pre-filled plastic ink. I need my feather quill and my ink pot, and then typewriters, like going to computers. I love my typewriter. I always write on my typewriter, or I always write by hand. So, things evolve. Electronic music, like, piano players, suddenly you're confronted with MIDI and synthesizers, and people are like, that's not music. And now everyone does it. It's like things evolve and you kind of adjust. Now, where it gets tricky with AI writing and art generation is you're talking about creative content generation, right? You get the things that triggers me about it is any kind of plagiarism, just kind of makes me upset, right? If someone is stealing your work, not giving you credit, not paying for it, at least not giving you credit, claiming it as their own. And that's where I think it's really tricky with AI, if people are going to be kind of quote unquote letting AI write books. Well, where do you think AI got the knowledge to write these books? Well, they did it by indexing zillions of books, right?
Yep.
So if
we're seeing a lot of lawsuits around that.
Right. So that's going to start getting controlled pretty quickly in terms of straight up plagiarism, where it's basically copy and paste. But whereas the AI engine who's creating something new out of this kind of lexicon, this enormous database of knowledge, if you want to put it that way, how is that? I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit. How is that different from anyone who's read a bunch of books and then writes a book and kind of has this literary reference there and has the theme from this book there and kind of it's sort of Tolkien-ish the way they write, everyone is synthesizing what they've experienced in this life and putting it down on paper. So if an artificial intelligence does the same thing and they do it well and they're creating something new, like, are you going to hate on that AI person?
I think there's an additional layer, because my uncle also works in the technology sector. I actually just saw him for the first time in years, and he was on ChatGPT pretty much the whole weekend. And he used it more as a Wikipedia type deal than anything else. And I think that's the crux of where I think a lot of this is AI as a writing should mainly be used as a tool. It can be used for, like, for me, I've prompted in like, oh, I need to come up with a good email to send to an employer, but the words are escaping me right now on a job follow-up. Can you give me some sort of text that I can then use as inspiration? I need to polish up my resume. Here's my resume. Can you take a look at it and see what other successful resumes that are, getting people hired look like? It can be used really well for that kind of stuff. Or, hey, I need to figure out kind of how to draw, like an artist can use it. I need to figure out how to draw this particular image. And in my brain, it's a griffin with a knight on its back flying off into the sun. Give me something like that. And then you can take that and kind of evolve it and use it to create your own art. It's more for like storyboarding almost. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's good for that. The thing is right now, to come back to the original thing that I initially cut you off for, is AI is not writing good stories right now. The stories aren't good. And they're being used as a kind of get rich quick scheme that doesn't work. And they're basically, people are generating, because there's a word limit that AI can generate. And so people are pumping out just AI generated short stories and submitting them to people to try and get them picked up, published, to make a few dollars, which is just asinine, because you're not going to make money that way. You're going to get caught. It's not going to work.
And they're flooding the zone with junk, right? So there's a lot of noise now. Well, I mean, that was a big complaint of indie authors. Remember all the trad publishing companies, like, there's so much, and like once there was self-publishing and Amazon, they're like, oh, there's so much garbage out there, right? Like the traditional publishing companies and agents are the filter through all this junk. So you don't have to filter through all this junk. Okay. So now self-publishing has kind of gotten some legitimacy over the years, right? If people have writers have become more professional and stuff. Well, now we got the AI influx of junk, right? So
Yep.
how are you as a consumer or a short story anthology editor going to deal with all this crap? Like, how do you figure out the good stuff from the bad stuff?
Well, right now, before we wrap up, because I know we're approaching our time limit, it's mainly right now it's honor system, which is we ran into that in SPFBO this year with the cover contest. It was an honor system, and if the author doesn't know that he's been lied to by an artist, then that person, it's a multi-tiered honor system right now. But at the same time, like using AI filters, I don't know if that tool exists yet. You've just got to basically sample the work and realize if it's any good or not, and then choose whether or not to continue to consume the content. And if it continues to fail and not do well, people will stop doing it.
Yeah. What if it gets really good?
Well, I think that's a discussion to have when we're kind of in that day and age, because I know I am not smart enough to have the answer.
So for me as a writer, it won't affect me individually in what I do, because I mean, I'm not making money from this. I'm not like getting a very wide, readership beyond this kind of little insular community and some of my friends. But I write just because I love to write, and it's healthy for me to write because I have this crazy imagination. And if I don't do something constructive with it, like I do destructive things with it. So it's better that I'm like channeling it into something productive and something, that's a craft that I can study and improve on. And so I'm going to keep doing it, even if like no one buys my book because everyone's buying AI books. Like it wouldn't really change how I do it. But yeah, anyway.
I think people like to consume stories. I would like to think that people like to consume stories that has passed through the human soul. I think that is something we look for in our reading and in our writing. And so I even if it does get really good, books that are currently being marketed as having a human co-author still are not doing very well. And right now we're at the point where the law exists where copyright material or AI generated material cannot be copyrighted. And I think publishers are making the mistake, and they're going to realize real quick there's no money in it, because as soon as you publish it, I can take it. And if I can take it and I can use it, you're not going to make any money. And I don't think we're going to see full on AI generated books, and if we do, they are going to be niche. I think I really would like to believe that we are only truly interested in consuming stories that come from the heart.
That is a beautiful quote. I think we should end on that.
You think so? All right. Well,
I'm only interested in consuming books that come from the heart. Said by Andrew Maddox.
Thank you. Well, like I said at the beginning of the live stream, I do have the Amazon links to your books in the description box down below. People, please do yourself a favor and check these out. I do love Palmer's work. And Palmer, I just want to give a huge thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to sit here and chat with me for some time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks all y'all out there.
Let's say the long goodbye. Bye, everybody.